it's both. Hi, welcome to Social with Christine Gritmon. This week we have a very exciting guest, Brian, iSocialFanz, Fanzo. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So Brian, tell us about yourself for a moment for anyone who may not know you already.
Sure. So I'm a technology guy, computer science major. I introduced myself today. I'm a speaker as my main kind of source of revenue as well as focus. But I'm someone I talk about being a change evangelist. So I have an interesting career in the fact that I've changed multiple times. I worked for 9 years in cybersecurity for the Department of Defense. So I traveled about 45 weeks a year. I've been to almost 70 countries, 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. So I was supporting the military for cyber. And I left there and went to a cloud computing startup out of Phoenix, Arizona. Did that for about 2.5 years, and we grew almost 3 times the amount of people in those 2.5 years. And I had a dream job. It was a technology evangelist. It was modeled after Guy Kawasaki and Robert Scoble on kind of what they did. And I realized kind of I wanted to reach more people and kind of go beyond just a singular company. And so I started the entrepreneur journey about 4 years ago. So I've done a little bit of, you can consider it marketing agency work for a while, realized that really wasn't my true calling. And so now I do some individual consulting. I host 2 podcasts, one called Smack Talk, which stands for Social, Mobile, Analytics, and Cloud. It's a very geeky podcast with my co-host Daniel Newman. And then I host another one that I launched at the beginning of this year called FOMO-Fanz, which is my goal of curing your fear of missing out. And that's probably my current passion. I love that podcast. It's taken off beyond my kind of wildest imaginations. And I do a lot on live video. I've done live video for since Meerkat came out. So it's been almost 2.5 years. And I've done close to 1,900 live streams just myself in that time. So I love live video. And then I think the big piece for me is I was an influencer. And then I started working with brands on building influencer campaigns. And now I do influencer strategies on how do you bring influencers as well as speakers to different events. And so I love that we're going to talk a little bit about events and conferences, because I was the guy with 1,100 followers on Twitter that nobody knew, going to large IBM events and VMware events. And I got some real great success kind of standing out from the noise that I can probably credit to some of my success today. But that's my quick story. I guess the caveat always is I talk fast, and I know that. So for everyone that's listening, you're like, man, he talks fast. I realize that. And if you listen to my podcast, just don't use the speed up. Don't listen to like 1.5x. I sound like Minnie Mouse. Other than that, I hope you can get everything out there. And I'm glad we got to meet in San Diego earlier this year. Absolutely.
It's great because you were already someone, I was looking, when I got on, I think it was Snapchat, I was like, all right, I don't know what I'm doing here. Who should I follow? And you were on all those lists of people to follow on Snapchat. So that's how I found you. And then, of course, you're everywhere else as well. So I was very excited to meet you at Social Media Marketing World. And I'm very glad that we've stayed in touch, especially since I think my journey is hopefully going to follow a similar trajectory in terms of I'm getting less into managing social for other people and more into teaching and live broadcasting and hopefully speaking at conventions and things like that. So to the point of conventions and seminars and appearances in general, you've been to a whole lot of them, I imagine. And to your point, I mean, at this point, I imagine since so much of your revenue stream now is from speaking events, you're probably at a lot of these events now as a speaker, but let's take it back a few years to, as you just said, when you were a person with like 1,100 Twitter followers who nobody knew at an IBM conference. How can someone at that level use the opportunity of a conference or an appearance like that to get their name out there? How can they make connections? What are some tips you have for someone who's going into that environment and like, how do I get something out of this?
No, I love that. And it's interesting because even where I'm at now, the way that I structure my speaking contracts is that I actually promise the event organizer that I'll be at the event for 6 hours rather than just fly in, get on stage, and get off. And part of that is what I've learned kind of along the way. And so for me, I think if you're looking at an event or a conference, you're either putting money up yourself or your company is putting money up and you got to sell your way there. And I think when you look at overall a conference, I have a hashtag I always use called show you care. And one of the things I really focus on is you have to show people you care before you want them to realize they should care about you. And what I mean by that is when I look at an event, I'm registering for an event, I see an event coming up. The first thing I do is, okay, what's the hashtag of the event? I'm going to start listening to that hashtag. I want to see who else is going. What kind of things are they talking about? Maybe even, I go to big events like, I go to South by Southwest. I've been there for 5 years in a row. And one of the things for me is not only finding out who's there, but finding out how to stand out. Like what events can I go to where the right people are in the right room? And I start very early. And what I try to do is I try to think about either a persona or certain people that I know I want to meet, right? I even make a list, and it's usually, either in a Twitter list or on Evernote, and I make a list of people. And my goal for that is to kind of not reach out to them immediately and say, hey, I want to meet you at that event. Because as soon as you say that, you're putting them on the defensive, right? Yeah. And your reply in the back is going to be like, I hope to see you there, right? Like that's not the same as kind of creating that relationship style. And so what I do is I usually amplify their content, and then I listen to what they're talking about. So if they're talking about like, hey, I'm super excited to come to the event, or maybe it's a speaker, and the speaker's like, it's my first time giving this keynote. Maybe giving that, hey, I can't wait. I'm going to be there cheering on your keynote. Good luck. If you want to run by slide, like almost kind of being like that, not like going from asking for something rather than going, you want to go at it and say, how can I support that person? And
offering value, starting by offering value.
Especially at the beginning. Like if your first impression is that you're amplifying my content, if you're, saying congratulations or good luck without even making that ask, right? Because I think that's the thing is we often are like, congratulations, can't wait. And I would love to meet you. Here's my cell phone number, right? Like all of a sudden that celebration went from you caring about me to you making it seem like you care about me and giving that call to action. And so I think that's the part. And I'm a big Gary Vaynerchuk fan. And his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, drastically changed how I do everything in social. And so if you had to look at a book that I recommend everyone, I think I've probably bought 35 copies of that book because I give it out to people. But the idea of jab, 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 right hook is exactly what it says is you jab, you give value, you give value, you give value, and then you right hook when the timing makes sense. And for me, for live events, more oftentimes than not, even someone that doesn't know who I was before, I engage and amplify them. They usually flip the back and they right hook me because they're at the event on day one and like, hey, thanks so much for sharing my content. Let's connect face to face. Like they're coming. So rather than me being like the nagging person that's making that request, by showing that value early, it's definitely one of those things to start off with. And then the other part of that is Twitter is great for live events. I mean, I really think, I don't even know if anyone finds Twitter without a live event. Like almost everybody's first, for me, it was a sporting event. I'm a big, of course, Steeler fan. I realize now I'm wearing double Steeler gear. But I moved from Pittsburgh.
It's your brand color scheme.
It is company colors after my love for sports. But I realized for me, I lived outside of Pittsburgh, but I wanted to connect with Pittsburgh people. And it's not because I want to follow everybody. I want to, who's talking about the game and the Steelers. And I just followed a hashtag. And that's kind of how I fell in love with Twitter. And Twitter is without question my favorite social network, without not even a hesitation. But the thing about events, that more so than anything, it's my. I would say 85% of my revenue is I can directly result to Twitter.
Oh wow.
For me, they're people discovering me, conversations that I have, and for me, how I talk about Twitter is I call it the unfiltered fire hose of live conversations. Yep. And if you think of it as a conversation platform, even though I share links, even though I provide a lot of content on there, for me, Facebook is great, but the only way that you can find me on Facebook is if you know me, you like me, you're friends with my friends, right? Like it's a very limited, but if you are on Twitter, anyone can find me. They can be looking for a hashtag, they can be looking for a phrase, and this is where it goes to the events because a lot of people will say, hey, Brian, you have 112,000 followers on Twitter. That's why you love Twitter at events. And the funny thing is if you have one follower and I have 112,000, at an event, we look exactly the same. Because when people are at events, they follow the hashtag. And inside of a hashtag, your tweet gets the exact same amount of space, no matter how many followers you have. And so I think a lot of people get discouraged on Twitter. And I love Twitter, but Twitter, the company, does a really good job of marketing themselves and helping people understand Twitter. But at an event, being part of that conversation on Twitter really is that I always say it's the glue to discover new people there at live events. So I do a lot of
discovered by new people. That's something I've absolutely used at events. In fact, there have been 3 conferences now where I walked in and people didn't really know me. Not only did I use the heck out of the hashtag and they followed me and they saw it up on the screens at the event when they were showing, tweets that came up with the hashtag, but it rippled out because there were companies that then published things saying, hey, here's the top people using this hashtag. I was the number 2 person out of 5,000 people at Social Media Marketing World using the hashtag. That got me followers. That got me attention. Then it's your job to keep it rolling. Once you have the attention, do something with it.
For sure.
That's such a powerful tool. It's huge.
And I think that right there is part of the game, right? Because when you're trying to build conference and events, like I'm a speaker, I would love to believe, or maybe even preach, that it's what you sit in the conference room and listen to these amazing speakers. That's the best part of the events. We know that's not true. The best time of events are the hallways, is the lunches, the dinners, the happy hours, those
hugs
events.
And selfies.
They are, hugs and selfies for sure. But the funny part about it is, to truly stand out, you kind of have to play both games, right? You can live tweet during, presentations. And I think live tweeting now has got a little bit more mainstream. And so I always tell people, don't tweet the quote that everyone's thinking about, right? Or has everyone, maybe put context on it, because you also have to remember people that aren't at the event will also be seeing those tweets, right? Because they're posted to your public feed. And, to get kind of noticed, to be on that top list, it's not only the most tweets, but it's the most tweets that either create engagement or that are seen by people or retweeted. And so I think one of those things that you kind of have to look at as you're pushing the Twitter side is, how can you use the Twitter functionality to stand out? And so Periscope, of course, I love Periscope live video. It's I have more followers on Periscope than I have Facebook. I had more followers on Meerkat than I did Periscope still to this day. But Meerkat was, unfortunately, rest in peace, is no longer a platform. But Twitter, the thing about Periscope is it tweets your live video directly in line on Twitter, which helps you stand out. You're now getting more space. Remember, I said I tweet with 112,000 followers, and I get the same space as one follower. But when you go a live video, it gets more space, you get more things. So I love to do a live video with friends in the hallway, even the day before, and use the hashtag, right? Because you want to get people to, for me, that's the key, right? When someone comes up to me at an event, I want them to know who I am, know what I'm about, and the conversation starts, because that's where the magic happens, right? If it's, you're doing introductions, you both have no idea who each other are, it really is hard to kind of take that next step. And then the other thing I love is regular Twitter video, not even live video. So every event that I go to, still to this day, the first day that I get on ground, so day 1 of an event, I do a Twitter video outside of the event. And it's just literally in the Twitter app. I hold it and you get 2 minutes and 20 seconds or 100 or 2 minutes. Yeah, it's 140 seconds, which is really nice because it's 140 characters. And so I simply just go here. I'm like, hey, I'm at this event. This is who I am. This is where I'm speaking, or this is what the things I'm looking forward to hearing. And then I put the hashtag, and I usually, tweet it out and pin it to the top of my profile on Twitter, because when people are at the event, they're looking at the hashtag, they're like, oh, what is he about? They click on your profile, read your bio. The next thing they see is that first tweet, right? So now I'm kind of capitalizing on that. And I'd say the last thing that I do every single event is I change my bio picture on Twitter to my most recent picture, because there is nothing more frustrating than going to an event and someone coming up and I've had this numerous times. They give me a big hug and I've been following you for years, Brian. And I'm looking, I'm I have no idea. And people might be surprised, 112,000 followers. If you engage with me, I can almost guarantee that I engage back as well as kind of do my due diligence to learn about you. And I'm oh, I don't recognize you. It's oh, well, I'm using a character or I'm using, and so I'm okay with random pictures on Twitter during times you're not going to meet people offline. But if you're going to meet someone offline, I'll even take one with a hat that I'm going to wear at the event. Because now I'm even taking a step further, right? If you want to stand out, if you're committed to having value, you want to do these little things, right? Simply changing that bio picture. So when someone sees me, they're oh, that connects, because, even now as a speaker, my favorite compliment, there's nothing better for me than when someone comes up to me afterwards, man, you are the same person online as you are offline. To me, that's
refreshing. It's a good thing.
For
nice.
Sure.
Actually, after social media marketing world, it's funny. I had just added the red to my hair right before it, and I wasn't even thinking of that as a thing. But so many people at the conference took notice of it and identified me by it that literally as soon as I got home, I got new headshots.
Love it.
They said I need to be recognizable here.
Yes, I tell you what, it's, I say be yourself is definitely my secret for everything that I do, right? And it's how do you stand out and be who you are? Maybe it's your business card. Maybe it's even like I've had some really fun people. Like I always do selfies. I know we took a selfie together in San Diego. I like selfies even more so than a business card, because for me, we're making that connection. We're posting on Twitter. I'm going to follow you back. And then that conversation can immediately continue, because we all know we get business cards. We maybe look at a couple and then we throw them on the nightstand in the hotel room and then they disappear. But yeah, it's all about how do you stand out? How do you be yourself? You don't have to color your hair or wear a hat. It's that element of like the fact that like when someone comes up to me at an event today, right? Like I'm now on the flip side now, and someone says like, "Oh, how are you doing?" My first thought is you have 30 seconds with me at the moment, and the thing that you care about is how I am doing, right? Like there's so much more that you can, because like my answer is like, I'm doing great. Actually, I always say wonderful. Wonderful is always my reply. I'm always like, I'm wonderful. How are you? But people come up to me and say, man, Brian, that new keynote, are you excited about it? What's your favorite slide? Bam, we start a conversation that gives you value, and it kind of, I will remember you, because everyone who asks me how I am, I'm sorry, that goes into a different bucket. So I think that's a little bit of work.
Context.
Yes. And
they give you context for themselves.
And those 10 people that I put on that list, so I put those 10 people on the list, I actually put on underneath their name, I put I think they're caring about at the event, or something I want to make sure to mention to them.
Oh, and good.
And to me, that's talking about a way to stand out. So like the first time I met Jay Bear, I remember walking up to Jay Bear and I'm like, Jay, I need to know where you got your suits. I love your suits. I hate wearing suits, but if I could wear a crazy plaid suit like yours. And he's like, hold on. And he's like, actually, I'm going to have to I'll text you it. All of a sudden, I got an email address and a text message from Jay. Nice. And then we put a picture together. And now I consider him a good friend, a mentor. But it's because for me, I knew that was something that he cared about. It was a conversation. He even had posted the day before. It was a Social Fresh event in 2013, and he had posted, this is my first time wearing this suit, right? And so that little bit, talking about, and I even got invited to a private dinner the next night by Jay. Ooh. And that I can relate that dinner to 8 of my closest friends on social media. That's all from one dinner. And I could say it all started with following the hashtag, seeing Jay was speaking there, seeing what Jay cared about. I had already read utility, and then coming up to Jay and making value when you have that time. And for me, that's direct ROI, right? Like the ROI of that has continued. And I think for too many people, we either get to an event and then we look at, because I'm not a big fan of booking out my schedule of what I want to consume, because I don't really think I know that ahead of time. I would rather say, who do I want to make an impact with, and what experience do I want to have, right? And so that kind of allows me a little bit bobbing and weaving, because some of the serendipity of events is magic, right? If you're like, I have to go to these 5 sessions. Well, if someone invites you to lunch and you're like, oh, I can't go, because you have almost like that overcommit. And I give credit to Ted Rubin. He told me when I went to South by the first time, he said, Brian, you'll never stand out. And then I made a hat that said, follow me. Are you following me? And it said iSocialFanz on the back, and I got in the newspaper for South by Southwest. But the other thing he said is, every invite you get, for every party, for every engagement, for every session, say maybe. He's like, if you say maybe, you're not making a commitment and you're keeping the door open. Because if you have a maybe to everything, then you can kind of bob and weave, because no one gets mad. Like if you don't come to see my session because you found another session or you got an awesome networking, as a speaker, I would never even be offended, because to me, you're getting the value that you want, right? It's the people that are like, oh, I sat in your session and watched you speak for the 5th time in a month. And I was mad that I didn't get to see, another speaker. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I think saying maybe gives you that freedom and doesn't make you feel like you're going to let somebody down. And I think that's extremely important, especially today, because you never know what happens at events.
Absolutely. I know there were moments at Social Media Marketing World and at a smaller social media conference that I recently presented at, where I literally didn't know what session I felt like going to until right before it. I had to make a game time call, like, okay, this one has subject matter that I could more immediately put into use in my business, but I really want to see this speaker. Which one am I going to get the more value out of? And it all depended, honestly, partially on mood.
Yep.
If you're going because of the speaker, are you going to make the most of that opportunity? Are you going to be, schmoozing with that speaker after? Are you going to be, is this someone you follow, or is it just that they're a big name, or is it someone where you're actually invested in their brand? Versus, I haven't heard of this person, but their tips might really help me, sussing out where you're at.
Well, and it's funny that you said that, because for every day of an event I go to, I spend 1 hour after the event going through the hashtag and going through the conversations that I had. And that includes oftentimes pulling down tweetables or pictures of slides that I didn't go to, right? Because I think it's that in social media marketing, it's probably one of the hardest, right? There's like 11 tracks at the same time. You have 5. 2 years ago, I was presenting with like 4 of like good friends, and I was actually telling people at the door, like, no, you've seen me speak, go to that one. Go, like I was telling them, like, if I was there, I wouldn't want to see myself speak. I would want to go see, my friends that are going. But just because you missed it doesn't mean you can't kind of grab some of those nuggets, or if they have like an online package or they do some streaming video. So for every day I'm at events, like South by last year, I did 10 days. And I tell you what, I probably did 12 hours over the next month, going back through my notes, going back through the tweets, going back to the people, and kind of summarizing that all for me, because the learning that happens, like you said, you're making a decision. It's a tough decision, but just because you weren't in that one room doesn't mean you can't still get some value. And it also helps because you've probably done this as well. It's like, oh, I missed that speaker. The next time you go to the event, you don't pay attention to what they're speaking about. You just want to go see that speaker. And then you get in there and you're like, oh gosh, this is Facebook ads, and I don't do Facebook ads. Like, you're like, I've done that. I can tell you I did it twice, actually. And it wasn't a social media event. It was a technology event. And I walked in there and I looked at the topic and was like, I just wasted an hour of my time. Yeah. And it was because I was blinded by the fact that I felt bad for missing the speaker. And I think if you can still get value from that speaker, it won't help you. You will prevent yourself from making a mistake at a future event as well.
This is definitely something I'm going to be dealing with. Next month, I'm going to Inbound in Boston. I know you were a speaker at Inbound last year. You're not going.
Great event.
I went last year, and my head was completely in the wrong place. It was the day after Election Day. I'd gotten up at 3 a.m. to drive. It was my wedding anniversary. There were like a million reasons my head wasn't in the game. And but one thing that I did do that I think I'm going to probably do again this year is some of the keynote speakers are more about big names now than about the content. Like, they've gotten really big on filling their roster with celebrities who maybe aren't as relevant to the actual inbound marketing game.
Yes.
So I allowed myself to kind of not get starstruck. I said, you know what? They're broadcasting this keynote with the celebrity on a huge screen right next to these beanbag chairs. I'm going to sit my ass down on a beanbag chair and do a little work and, pay attention and occasionally tweet something, but I don't need to be in that room if they're not talking about something that's directly relevant to me. However, I mean, the last year, the thing that I attended that I got the most value out of, and I didn't see yours, unfortunately, because I left a day early, actually. But the presentation I got the most out of was actually by the founders of HubSpot. It wasn't by any of the big celebrities, because they were talking to my actual needs. So I'm going to try to temper that this year as I go. I mean, they've got Michelle Obama, they've got Brene Brown, they've got Judd Apatow. I'm going to try really hard to look at what they're actually speaking about. And if they're speaking about something that isn't as relevant to my business, maybe I'll use that time to network.
For sure. And especially like if they have a TED Talk or they have something that's already out there that you can consume. And I think this is, I Inbound, I had a blast. It was my first Inbound last year. Mm-hmm. The results for me as a speaker were amazing afterwards as far as growing business. I actually flew in directly from Australia the day before. Like it was a crazy, I landed at 8 a.m. From Australia because my flight got delayed in Atlanta, and I had to stay the night in Atlanta. And I was on stage again at 11 a.m. and it was crazy. But the event I had so much fun at the event, but I think a majority of events have gone this way. And I think it's sad that we're looking at big name celebrities because we think that sells tickets and gets sponsors, when I still challenge that every day, right? I think I would rather have a Brene Brown or Simon Sinek, someone that's talking to a topic, and or even for me, it's some of the events that hire me to keynote. I opened opposite of Steve Wozniak last year, and I laughed because the feedback for him was Brian provided more value than Steve, and I was like, Steve is like my hero. Like, I mean, Apple Steve. And part of it was because for so many of those people that were there, we were all tech geeks. We knew Steve's story. We knew so unfortunately, it kind of went on deaf ears. And I think we're going to see events.
New to the table.
Yeah, and we're going to see events change. I tell you what, I loved the side rooms. I got to see Marcus Sheridan, one of my favorites, speak at that event. I got to see a ton of value at Inbound. I did not enjoy the interviews with the celebrities. I think Will Smith is someone I've seen be interviewed, and he blew my mind. Amazing marketing advice, inspirational advice. I've seen Kevin Spacey, amazing. Majority of the other celebrities, the reason that they're celebrities for movies is because they're good at acting on script. And the reason they don't give a keynote standing by themselves is because they don't have that much to say, right? Like, and it's like a weird disconnect. Because last year I thought the big name keynotes kind of missed. But like you said, how can I kind of like segue that time? I know for one of them, I actually sat with Marcus in a separate room. We had it on the TV, and we were brainstorming back and forth the entire keynote, where we were still paying attention. We still followed on Twitter, but we got that kind of additional value because you only have a certain amount of time. And I can tell you, I think we've all figured this out. I think you even tweeted me after the event and was like, I can't believe I didn't get to see you at Inbound. Like it's that feeling like, oh, I missed out on too much. And sometimes it's because we prioritize things that we think everyone should be doing rather than what we should be doing individually, because I think that's how we get the most out of these, especially these ones with multi-tracks and crazy amount of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now we have some people who have said stuff, so let me see.
All right.
Yes, Katie, you can pop up whenever. Robert Zinser says, go Steelers.
Right.
Well, Tiger wants to know, did events reach out to you, or did you reach out to events when you originally started speaking at events? And I'm certainly interested in knowing this as well. I'm sure now they reach out to you, but...
So, I kind of got brought into the tech space as a speaker. So I have I work for a brand that sponsored events. So my brand would get a speaking spot, and I was that speaker. And then what had happened was I left that brand. I went on my own, and I couldn't get a side stage of these events because the brand kind of got that spot. It wasn't me. And so what I do from a speaking perspective is I over amplify and participate in that event, even if I'm not going there. I participate in the hashtag a year before I want to speak there. So for Inbound, for example, perfect example, and I can explain this easily. I knew some friends at HubSpot. Marcus Sheridan, a lot of people that work with Inbound, but wasn't on their radar. I'm sorry?
Were you a HubSpot partner? I
was not. I am not a HubSpot partner. And for a majority of my clients, it's like that. I have the enterprise and then I have the entrepreneur. So where HubSpot's kind of target value across that board is a little bit distant for me. So I wasn't a partner, but I started participating in the Twitter chats. I actually asked them if they wanted me to do a guest blog for their website. And all of a sudden I started having that conversation with them. And for me, it was that a year early when I put it on my radar, and I put it in I think it was like probably January of 2015. I said, in the fall of 2016, I'm going to speak at Inbound. And I started making that conversation, and that to me kind of starts the ball. And then they open up, you can apply to speak. So they do it, like some events apply, some events you do it through different venues. But the thing that I did at that event is I had built that relationship with some of the people at HubSpot. And so I actually reached out to them after they made the call for speakers and said, which tracks have people talking about what I'm talking about? Where do you think would be the most successful? Because you
need from me.
From me, correct. Like, how can I help the event, right? It's the same way. Like, I'm a speaker and I can do an hour keynote I've spoken in front of 13,000 people on a main stage. I can do a workshop style. And what ended up happening is they came back and said, Brian, the 12-minute Ignite talks, we don't have anybody talking about like your type of topic there. And I was like, ooh, 12 minutes. I was like, I talk fast, but like 12 minutes is still, a fast time. I was like, well, how about I do a talk that I've never done before? And because Inbound they don't pay their speakers some of the majority of events pay speakers, some events don't pay speakers. And since they don't, for me, I usually try to speak about something different at an event that's not paying me. And I look at the audience, say, what can I give to that audience that they're not going to get on any other presentation? And so my presentation at Inbound was actually, the title was Limitations Inspire Creativity. And the idea was that just because Snapchat doesn't give you analytics doesn't mean you can't grow your Snapchat by screenshotting and throwing it on Twitter. Just because Facebook Live only tells you only see certain people live doesn't mean you can't download the video and put it on YouTube. So it was all about not letting the limitations of platforms from stopping your creativity of how you use it, how you reach people. And the talk I had never given before. I've only given it one time since, and it went over amazing. I mean, the feedback I got, the feedback forms. I had some of my favorite speakers, David Meerman Scott, Mitch Joel. They were all in the audience.
Oh wow!
Which was a very humbling experience.
That'd be great.
But I think overall, the way you get noticed as a speaker, in my opinion, is you have to be known for something. You have to have something that resonates, and then you have to speak. In 2015, I would say 85% of my speaking was free. I spoke at local meetups. If someone, and I was like, hey, fly me there and give me a hotel, I'll speak, right? And you have to make the most of that, right? You have to make the most of when you're speaking, how that works. And then, as you kind of grow, you kind of have to just decide. I have something that I call holistic value of an event. So inbound, for example, I'm pretty transparent with my data. Look, inbound doesn't pay me to go there. I had to rebook my flights. It was a mass chaos. But I knew that if I gave a new keynote, the right people were in the audience, and I was reaching I had never spoke at an inbound marketing event. So I had a whole branch of new people there. So the holistic value of that event was going up and up. And I can tell you, I didn't get paid for that event, but I've revenue generated from people that went to that event or saw me at that event is $37,000. Yeah. So $37, and that's, to me, is perfect example of doing it free when that holistic value makes sense. I do believe that too many events are not paying speakers and yet making massive profit, right? And you're like, It has to be a little bit of back and forth. But when someone says they're going to give you exposure to me is like, it's almost offensive in a way. Yeah. But I always challenge you, what can you take back? And so like for an event that I'm speaking at next month, they wanted half my speaking fee. And I said, well, I'll do my speaking fee for half, but I would like to have a dinner with 2 of your executives. Because for me, that holistic value is, okay, I have to take a lesser fee, but if I can get FaceTime with 2 executives at a company like Capital One, I can probably add 2 or 3 more gigs on top of that, and I get that access to them. And so that's kind of how I always challenge back, because sometimes we only want money back and like, okay, well, they're not paying me. Well, what can they give you? And that's an easy give, right? Like, oh, I'll just put it on the calendar. What can they give you so that you still feel like you're getting something out of it and you're not wasting your time? But it was 85% free in 2015. 2017, it's 85% paid. So I've kind of flipped the model in that. But if it wasn't for those early times, I mean, I did 50 events last year, 50 events in 11 countries. And it's a lot. It was ridiculous. It was crazy. But I can almost look at each one of those along the way and say how they've each allowed me to kind of grow, not only as a speaker, but kind of connect. Because sometimes it's just connecting with other speakers that get you gigs, right? And like, absolutely, that part of it is just as important in events and conferences as it sometimes is with the event professional. Absolutely.
I think that's one of the only questions. Yeah. So is there anything else that you'd like to throw in there?
So I think for events and conferences, as you move forward, just because you don't go to an event doesn't mean you can't participate. And it's not.
That's huge.
And I think something I hate is that if you're tweeting on a hashtag or you're posting even on Facebook about an event, don't put your blog links or your links to your website in every single tweet or in every single, like it's such a, because that to me, and it's funny because there's David Meerman Scott, who I'm a big friend of. He has a book that's called Hashjacking, and it's all about how to hijack a hashtag and be part of a conversation. But it really is about I always want to be a part of the conversation and add value, so people come to me and say, "What do you do, and how can I hire you?" Right? Because when the conversation comes that way, oh, it's a win. You blasting messages out or auto DMs and these things that people are doing. Yes, they can win small wins, but they're going to probably alienate and polarize more people than they are other places. And the other thing about it is, wherever your primary place to engage in content is, I don't care if it's Snapchat, it could be Pinterest. Don't be afraid to kind of drive conversation there for an event, even if you're not sure that the conversation's happening there, right? Mm-hmm. I was at an event in Denmark, and I was the only English speaking speaker. It was all Danish speakers, which was really odd for me to stay the whole day because I had to sit in the audience, and I was like, I could get like every 8th word. But I love Denmark's one of my favorite countries. I've spoken there a couple times now. But one of the things that was funny was that I realized that I had a lot of people in my LinkedIn community that were UK focused kind of part of that Copenhagen startup market. And so I actually started posting because it was a 2-day event. I posted 4 times each of those days to LinkedIn, summarizing the event, a picture of the presentation, and I coupled the comments. I think I got 130 comments on a LinkedIn post, which is like probably one of the most I've ever got. And because I realized tweeting about Danish speakers in Twitter was not it just wasn't going to happen. Then I thought where is my audience going to get the most value from the content that I can share, right? And I think that's something that we have to kind of push ourselves kind of outside the boundaries for. And then the last thing I think is, don't be afraid to ask the event or the sponsors how you can help them, right? One of the things that I always do is I ask the event organizer the day before the event, if I'm speaking, what sponsor needs the most love, right? And so when I'm there, I'm going to go to their booth, I'm going to tweet about them, I'm going to tag them in pictures, and I'm going to give them just a little bit of extra love, because it's amazing doing that little bit makes the sponsor happy. The sponsor goes to the event professionals and says, thank goodness I saw Brian doing that. And all of a sudden, if they had 4 speakers, all 4 got great reviews, and one of their sponsors that's footing the bill came and gave validation for me, all of a sudden I stand out beyond those 4 people. And it was as simple as 5 minutes in their booth, right? Or 10 minutes. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of forget, that you can do some of these free things. And you can have 2,000 followers and the sponsor's going to love it, right? Because it's free amplification. I mean, no brand's going to say, please don't talk about me. Well, I guess it's bad content, but please don't amplify me. Please don't celebrate what I'm doing. And I think that's an important note to remember, because it doesn't just have to be the attendees or the event organizer. Look at the sponsors oftentimes. That's a great place to start.
That's a good call. Chris King asked, have you ever been heckled or had someone challenge your talking point? And if so, how did you handle that?
Oh, I love that. I love that. So my favorite thing is a Q&A. I absolutely love Q&A. I'm actually doing a presentation in October where we're sending all of the attendees my keynote via video, 45-minute video the day before the event. And we're doing the entire hour only Q&A. So it's purely only Q&A, mainly because that's what I love, because I want to give actionable insights and I want that challenge. But the funny thing is when I heard that question, I've been heckled before. I also, you brought up social media marketing world. 2 years ago, I had the worst time slot in the history of social media marketing world, because I had the large room, the space before Gary Vaynerchuk. And 20 minutes before Gary's keynote, a push notification to every single person that had the app said, come early to Gary's keynote to get a seat. Well, I'm on stage with still 15 minutes left of my presentation, and over half of the audience just stands up and just literally walks out. And you kind of have as a speaker, you have 2 ways to react, right? Let it throw you off your game, or figure out a way to either ignore it or kind of inspire you, right? And so for me, I actually jumped off the stage and I was like, where's everybody going? And it's someone literally just hands me that, shows me the thing. And I was like, well, damn, I want to see Gary Vee too. I was like, tell you what, I promise to cut off right on time for those that are sticking around. And I jumped back on stage and I immediately switched kind of my conversation to hey, when you guys hear Gary talking about this, and I used that negativity, what most people would see it, as a way to really not only inspire those that were there, but to thank them, right? Because they weren't prioritizing Gary over me, but they were staying in the seats. And then when someone heckles, usually they're heckling because they want attention, or they don't often disagree. They often want to be heard, right? And so I will often come back to someone, and this, when I get on live video, my most powerful phrase on live video is saying, I don't know. And if you're able to say, I don't know, it adds validity to what you do know. And on stage, I say, I don't know all the time. And I've had speakers come up to me and say, Brian, stop doing that. You are supposed to be an authority, a thought leader. Why the hell are you saying I don't know? I was like, because I don't know. And it's
very outdated.
And the audience knows that you're not perfect. The audience knows you don't know everything. And I'm okay with that. And so usually if someone heckles, I will challenge back and say, oh, did you have a question for me? And sometimes they'll ask a question. And usually it's oh yeah, because I talk about millennial topics a lot. So this is what I usually get. Typical millennial. I see you up there with your hat on and your crazy shoes. But let's face it, millennials are entitled. They don't want to listen to anybody. And why would we even care what you have to say? Because it's probably not true. None of you actually care. And I will often be like, okay, they've been affected somewhere, right? And so rather than just kind of taking the defense and saying you're wrong, I'm like, can you give me an example in your business where a millennial gave you that feeling? Because all of a sudden, I now put the spotlight on them. that they were begging for that most people don't give them. And usually they'll go, well, I guess it's not all bad millennials. And then they'll say, well, so this was a time, and like they'll give me the scenario, and I'll be like, so can I ask you to add some perspective here? Like, let's put on their shoes and how they approached you, and like, how would you have done it differently? And it's amazing, usually turning a heckler into a way to not only the audience to learn, but for everybody to kind of come on board. Like this, I'm not up there to tell you that I know everything. I'm hopefully inspiring you to realize the things that you should accomplish. And I think that's usually the best way for me to kind of challenge that without being defensive, because, you know, comedians can be defensive, right? And some big name people that have that shtick, like Scott Stratton, who does unmarketing. I mean, I love Scott. Scott is absolutely hilarious. One of the best keynote. If you guys have a chance to see Scott Stratton, without question, probably my favorite in the marketing space across the board. Comedy is part of his routine. And so if you heckle him, he will literally challenge back right at you, right? He'll have a lot of fun at it. And that's because it's him. But I've seen speakers that look up to him and do that same thing. And I'm like, you came off as a jerk. And like your entire message was inspiration and, you know, motivation. And all of a sudden you were a jerk. And now I don't even know if I believe the inspirational things you said, right? And so it's kind of like trolls on live video. You have to decide if you want to give them attention, make the attention worthwhile for you, or ignore it and own what you're doing because you got the spotlight and you kind of play it either way.
Yeah. But turning challenges into content. That's what it's all about. Turning everything into content. Yep.
And I worked with multiple brands to actually hire their biggest hater. I tell them all the time, like, if you have someone that, I mean, like there was a brand and they had this, it wasn't a startup. I'd say they had like 80 employees. They had someone that was using their app since day one, literally every month, giving them a list of things they needed to change over and over. And they were like, how do I deal with him? How do I get rid of him? I said, get rid of them. They're spending that much time, still in your app.
Yeah, that's really key.
Yeah, and providing you feedback. They don't hate your app. They have a passion for what the app's going to help them accomplish. I was like, why not hire them? And they're like, what? I was like, they have that dedicated. Imagine if they were dedicated full-time job inside of your walls, right? And I think that's a fun twist to it as well, because it's almost like, hey, if they're that, you know, it's either, because there also are people that hate for hate, right? There's a difference between what I believe people that spew hate and people that troll a brand or complain, right? Because trolling and complaining oftentimes is just an idea, like they want to be heard or they have something to say. Spewing hate is usually an agenda play, right? We talked about the election, like there's a lot of people that are spewing certain things for their own agenda, and those people can't be helped, right? Like I'm a big fan of like, I disagree with you, but I'm not, let's agree to disagree and move on, right? Like that's swim lane. But the group that just wants attention, if you're confident enough to be able to give them the attention and not let it fall on deaf ears for the whole room, it can probably change the entire audience's opinion of an event.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you so very, very, very much for being here. I'm so glad we've stayed in touch.
My pleasure.
I'm excited to see you next February, March, if not before.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And I'll be speaking at, I have 11 events next month. So I'll be all over the place, and all over the place. Like I'll be in, Ohio. I'll be in all these different places. So check out my website, iSocialFanz.com/speaker. And all my locations are up there to come see me there. And if your audience wants,
everywhere basically in terms of social media platform, anywhere you are, people
iSocialFanz.
He's there.
And I am. And I tell everybody, I'm there so that I can help you decide where to prioritize. I get to be on every channel. I don't want everybody to be on every channel. It's usually like a caveat I have to give. But yeah, even like Tumblr, Pinterest, WeChat, I'm on all of those, because for me, even with that podcast, my goal is to present the features and benefits for you and allow you to make the right decisions. So thanks so much for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. And to everybody watching, I do this every Friday at noon, Christine Gritmon Inc. Facebook page. Every Friday at noon, I talk with somebody about social media. Sometimes it's fellow social media professionals. Sometimes it's a small business. Next week, it's a small business. I'm on vacation, so I found someplace near there.
Nice.
And yeah, check it out. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.